Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I
I can
think
hear you
we
great.
are live, and I am going to get us started. Okay, hopefully we have this under control today. I don't think we're going to have any technical issues. My name is Ashley Winkle. I am with the Literacy Council of Tyler in Tyler, Texas. I'm just now starting the role of Director of Distance Learning, but I am also a technology coach, a professional development trainer, and I teach high school equivalency classes. I've been teaching for a little bit over 5 years, and I love what I do. But I particularly love integrating technology into my instruction. So when I discovered hyperlinks, HyperDocs, I was very excited. My boss came across it back in about February. There's a great book online that you can get at Amazon pretty cheap that goes over it if you want more information. So I went and got the book and just fell in love. I use HyperDocs for every lesson I do. I would say about 95% of the time because you can literally use them for anything. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, just so you know, is really an overview, and I will stop in certain sections for questions and comments. We're going to do a part 1 and a part 2. So today is a part 1. This is going to be more of an overview, and then part 2 will be more of a how-to session. So our objectives today, by the end of the session, educators will know what a HyperDoc is and how it is implemented, how to use HyperDocs in administration, professional development, and classroom roles, reasons to use HyperDocs, and skills, knowledge, and technology required to use HyperDocs. So HyperDocs, what are they? So we're going to walk through our first HyperDoc together by looking at a very basic HyperDoc introducing HyperDocs. So it's a HyperDoc on a HyperDoc. There's, I think, several people have done these, so this is just one example. The cool thing about HyperDocs is you can always tweak it to meet your needs, which is what my favorite thing is about it, because so many of the ones I've used are borrowed from K through 12 teachers, because HyperDocs has a wonderful community out there that loves to share with each other, and they've really helped me get some ideas going. But you can also use mine for K through 12 as well. So the first thing is, so this is what a HyperDoc might look like. Now this is done on a Google document. They're often done on Google Slides as well. But the first thing is you have to make sure when you first open it, you need to follow the directions. And a lot of times that means you need to make the directions yourself. But you need to go to File and make a copy, because if you don't do that, you can't edit the HyperDoc itself. So you wouldn't be able to type on it, which kind of loses the point of it. So from there, you just click on OK. I usually recommend to my students to always exit that initial tab so that they don't get confused between tabs. You're going to notice as we go through this that you're going to have a lot of tabs open. So usually after each step, I recommend to my students to go ahead and exit out of that tab. Otherwise, they end up with about 20 tabs up there. Now that I've made a copy, I'm able to type on my document, because as I go through each step, I'm constantly going back to my HyperDoc because I'm interacting with the document. There are a number of things you can do. You can share, the student can share. I used to have my students just type in my email, they'd share it to me that way. That way I can go through and I can make comments and see what they're doing as they're doing it. So it provides that formative assessment as they're doing their work. But a lot of people, and what I do now is I use Google Classroom. I think it's a lot easier to organize it, and I don't get inundated with emails that way. So if you use Google Classroom, I highly recommend using that because I think it's the best strategy. Otherwise, you can always share the link. I would shorten it. That would be my recommendation, either with Bitly or Google Shortener, but some way, or you could also email it. So there's different ways to share the document with your students. Now, you'll notice this is being based on a template that was already made. There are a lot of templates out there that they've already made, and what they do is this one I got from the HyperDocs website, It's my favorite one. It's my go-to one, but they really walk you through how to do each section. So in the first section, usually you want to do something like a hook, or get something to get the students' attention, to give them an idea of what they're about to learn about. In this case, it's a video. I have included a link to this HyperDoc in the chat box, so if you want to access it there, you can. But you would click on the video. I'm not going to do that because I think that's what messed up my last session. But you're welcome to do that on your own. It's just a short overview of what a HyperDoc is. It's less than a minute long. If you use something like a video editor like Edpuzzle, that's a great tool to use with HyperDocs. That way the student can watch and actually answer questions as it's going. So afterwards, what they would do is, after they've watched the video, you might want to ask them a question. So in this case, what thoughts do you have about HyperDocs so far? Well, we didn't get to see the video, but I'm going to say they are awesome. And then I go to my next section. So in my next section, I have provided us with an Explore, Take a HyperDoc Tour. So let's take a HyperDoc tour by clicking on the image. This is going to take me to a website that someone else has created for me and will allow me to learn a little bit about HyperDocs. So as I'm going through my website, I do want to look at I'm looking for at least 3 reasons to use HyperDocs. Type the answers below. I usually have my students open two different windows up at the same time so they can do their work on one side and then read on the other side. So what's a HyperDoc? HyperDoc is a Google document that replaces the worksheet method of delivering instruction and adding innovation and inquiry-based learning methods. It's full of instructions, links, graphic organizers, and any other tools needed for a student to complete a task. It can be used in class with a balanced flow between teacher-directed instruction, discussion, or as flipped work. It is a collaborative, easy to use for individuals, partners, or group work. And then I'm going to go, and I'm just going to look. I'm not going to go through the whole tour. I just want to give a basic idea of how HyperDocs work. So HyperDocs are basically all about packaging. There's a visual effect, organization, collaboration, inquiry learning, inspires curiosity, and basically it brings learning alive. How are they delivered? They can be delivered through Google Documents, Google Slides, or you could even use a Google site. I've never done it that way. I usually prefer Google Documents or Google Slides. Google Slides is the most fun if you want to do something that's a little bit more visual because you have a lot more freedom. And then I just wanted to show this little slide section. HyperDocs can have a changing effect on your pedagogy. So is your view from the front of the class, is your class exploring ideas, discovering, applying knowledge? Depending on how you build a HyperDoc, you can include many layers of digital lessons that are often, which every lesson I do is based on content standards, and usually we hit several. It's innovative pedagogy, authentic use of digital tools, flexible plans, packaging, and workflow. HyperDocs create inquiry-based lessons which enable students to learn through exploration of a topic. Collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving can be embedded into a HyperDoc using Google Apps in creative ways. And a HyperDoc can inspire curiosity for learning. We're going to stop it there. And then you're going to notice I'm exiting out of all of my tools. Okay, and I'm going to stop for 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my presentation. So HyperDocs are a document that replaces the worksheet method of instruction. It is a Google document that adds innovation and inquiry-based learning strategies. But wait, what is a Google document? So if you don't know what a Google document is, it's an application where documents can be created, edited, copied, and stored on a web cloud. It resembles Microsoft products. Google Documents are free, automatically save, and allow users to share, comment, and collaborate with one another anytime, anywhere. Are documents that guide students with step-by-step instructions, incorporate links, graphic organizers, videos, and other outside web-based resources. And they create opportunities for choice and exploration. And I also wanted to include, this is coming from one of the formative educators who I've gotten to know on Formative. And I liked her description of HyperDocs, so I wanted to share it. Her description was, HyperDocs are a great organizational tool to put an entire chapter, unit, or module into play. The activities can be placed into Google Classroom, and students can work at their own pace. The lessons become more project-based as a result, and the teacher becomes more of a guide during the process. HyperDocs are carefully crafted digital lesson plans that require educators to have a mindset of thoughtful pedagogy. They are visually engaging and packaged learning experiences. They are how students use technology to create, collaborate, think critically, and connect. What they are is not just a Google Doc with links, a pre-made curriculum program, or a new app or web tool. So now, as we're going through, we're going to see several different examples of HyperDocs. And as we're doing it, I really would like everybody just to try to keep in mind, what are the skills a teacher and student might need as we're going through these? Before I continue, though, I am going to stop here for a moment to see if there's questions, comments, or concerns.
I can help you out. Let's see. Don't see any questions.
Okay. Okay, we'll keep going in just a second here. I am going to switch out my headset because I am getting that feedback again. So I'm going to try it with a different one. If you can bear with me 1 second.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I had to stop sharing my screen again. It happened again. I don't know what is happening, so let me try again.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share it. I
can hear you.
Okay, Nicole, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're going to keep going then. Okay. Sorry, technical difficulties again for some reason.
You're fine.
Okay, so HyperDocs, how to use in education. We're going to look at HyperDocs from a supervisor, professional development, and administrative uses. So our first example is going to be one that my boss created. Professional development and administrative uses. So our first example is going to be one that my boss created. Okay, so this one this is a very base product. She actually wanted one where they didn't have to engage. Where they didn't have to actually make a copy. So she created one where they did not have to. So in this one, you'll see that on the left they explore, and on the right is where they have a task to do. So first they come over here and look at the Texas Adult Education and Texas Guidelines. They click on it and they go and read.
Hey, Ashley.
And on the right side is where they have tasks. So she asks them questions, and so that they can answer, she has them go to a Google form. Once they're in the Google form, they simply answer the questions and submit, and she has them emailed to her. Then she provides them with the definitions. Again, they go to click on it, they go to the definitions.
Hey, Ashley.
Yeah.
If you just turn off the volume on your computer, you won't be able to hear yourself.
I do what?
If you turn the volume off on your computer,
okay.
You won't be able to hear yourself.
Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay, my volume is off. Hopefully you guys can still hear me though. Okay, from there we've got, she had them then go to explore the measurable skills gains, and then they went to a Padlet, which is one of my favorite tools to use with HyperDocs, where everybody could collaborate and share their ideas. In this case, she had them, what do you think these strategies will look like in your classroom? And everybody shared their own thoughts on that. If you haven't used Padlet, I highly recommend it. It is one of my favorite tools to use. It's very simple and easy to use as well. So that was an example from administrative. She also had done one for a grant application, and some professional development ones. The next one I was going to look at, however, was one that I did. As soon as I get it to pull up. I must not have connected the link. Well, we'll look at this one first. So this one was a professional development one she did for when we have new staff. Instead of having them do a live training, a face-to-face training, she came up with a HyperDoc where they could learn for themselves and do this on their time. And they interact with the document as they go through each step again. So again, she used a Google form to guide them. From there, they click on the various links to learn about their roles in our profession and what they needed to do within the 30-day period. She also takes them to different how-to videos and that show them how to do different things, print certificates and that sort of a thing. And they go through it, but it basically gives them a nice quick overview and plus something that they can save so that if they need to go back and reference it, they can always go back to their Google Drive and it'll be saved there. Okay, moving on, I'm guessing there's still no questions at this point. I'll come back if there are. So this is, I want to get into HyperDocs classroom uses. And this is actually my class. We were doing a HyperDoc. It was my high school equivalency class working on a collaborative reading assignment using a HyperDoc lesson. So the first one we're going to look at, so as we're doing these, you might want to make observations about the following: what tech tools are being used and what skills are the students learning using as they work through the HyperDocs. So the first one we're going to look at is I believe this one's a reading assignment, and originally was done by, I don't know, I don't want to say her name wrong, but Tracy Enos, I believe is how you say her. I hope I didn't ruin her last name too bad. But Tracy makes some really unique, really fun HyperDocs. And I'm going to put it in present mode so you can see it a little bit better. Usually the students won't do it in present mode because they need to be interacting with the document. But in this one, so this was Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl. And I had to tweak it because she teaches 8th grade and I teach adults. So I tweaked it a little bit to meet our needs, but it was a really fun lesson. You'll notice that I always put directions on each one. Usually those students catch on pretty quickly and they get used to doing these on their own. First part was a pre-reading. So I had them go to vocabulary.com to familiarize themselves with some of the vocabulary in the story. And after they do the vocabulary lesson and base it on what the title is, they were to give me some ideas of what they thought the story might be about, which I got some very interesting answers on that. From there, you engage the students. So stories are a huge part of our world. In your opinion, what makes a good story? Let's talk about it. They then type their answers in the box. And then we move on to the explore section. They check out the following resources to get ready to read our story. Well, on the left side, which was pretty fun, was Lamb to the Slaughter takes place in the 1950s. Click on the Happy Housewife to see a passage from a 1950s high school economics textbook, which was very interesting because my class is composed of primarily females. So they got to read what the expectations were on how to be a good housewife, and then they answered the question if they could imagine taking a class like that. And then on the other side, they go to the link again, and they read about 10 signs that someone is lying to you. And from there, we watched 2 short video clips. One is about Roald Dahl and his books to film. The other was about what dramatic irony is. And then we used, I believe Tracy used a different website, but in this case, I used CommonLit, which is an awesome website for reading. It's because they guide you through, they give you guided questions, so you can't just jump ahead. Students do have a sign-in, so it did take them straight to the site. I usually use sites that will let us log in with Google or Google Classroom, and this is one of them. So if you're not aware of this site, I highly recommend checking it out. It's pretty awesome. And we did the reading. In this case, we did do the reading together and answered the questions together, and then they did assessment questions afterwards. And then our next section, we discussed context clues and meanings. And then at the end, Dahl chose not to tell us exactly what happened at the end, but what do you think? So they went to the Padlet and shared their thoughts about how they thought the story might end. Now, sometimes and then we did have one final part where we went to quizzes, which is another super fun website. If you've not done it, they go to quizzes, enter the code, and they do a game on quizzes. And then they reflect. Almost every HyperDoc has an exit ticket of some sort where they reflect, did you enjoy the story, why or why not? And they put their answer there. And then as a final section, HyperDocs usually has an extend version where they can further their learning. in this case, what we did is we watched the Alfred Hitchcock version of this book, and then we compared the two together. Most HyperDocs have an extend version. What that does is it really helps you to differentiate your instructions. So for those students that work really quickly versus others that move slowly, if they get done, they can go to the extend version, and that's where usually what you're going to do is include something where they can continue to explore the topic. The next one we're going to look at, this was a goal setting HyperDoc I made. We have these forms that we have used for many years that drive me crazy because I hate paper. I know it's probably just me, but paper just makes me insane. And so I asked if I could make it digital, if we could use it that way instead. It's not pulling up. Darn it. I'll have to do it from my drive. So I got approval to do this, and I basically took things that we currently do and I put it all onto a HyperDoc. You're also going to notice with HyperDocs, some of them are going to be long. I've noticed with K through 12, I've seen some real, I think I've seen some that are as long as 100 pages, but they are probably doing entire units. In adult education, we don't have that much time. We tend to get new students from classes are always changing, so I try to keep them short. But a lot of times what will happen is they do turn into units, not just simply lessons, so they can tend to go on for a couple days, if not weeks or months in some cases. So in this case, this is a chart that we use in adult education. I took the chart and I just went ahead and put it on the HyperDoc. And based on the chart, I had students enter their own scores at the beginning. So they would put their baseline score, and then based on the chart, their goal was to always move up a level. So they were to go up there and determine what level they needed to be at to meet their goals. Which, what I liked about it, and I hadn't thought about it when I first created it, was the fact that they were getting a little bit of practice there on reading charts and tables. And they're also taking some responsibility for their own learning. So they knew themselves exactly where they needed to go instead of me just telling them and them not really listening to me. They had a better understanding. From there, they discussed their educational goal when they wanted it completed. They were then to discuss their support system they had at home, what was helping them, what was hurting them as far as making sure that they complete our program. They then went on to a goal setting interview. So they click on the link, they do the interview, which asks questions, what their interests are and that sort of a thing, and they go back to their doc. They then took a self-inventory about things that they like. And then we did a vocabulary lesson to help them with some of the words, and they were to take those words and choose at least 5 to describe the kind of person they think they are and 5 that describe them. And then they add additional personality strengths. They also got to learn about their learning styles they went to multiple intelligences, and they took the assessment. And after they took the assessment, they shared on here what they learned based on about their learning style. And then we set more specific dates, immediate goals, short-term goals, and long-term goals. And then they were to write a paragraph to their future self. In this, there's a website. They wrote a paragraph here to their future self, set a goal about how they felt the day that they achieved that goal, and then they went to the Future Me website, which is a really fun little website. And they pasted that paragraph in here, and what they did is they put their email in, set a date, a specific date that they would get that email, and on that date they would automatically receive that email, and they'd see if they had achieved that goal by that date or not. For my GED class, or I'm sorry, it's called HSE now, high school equivalency class, they also went a little bit further with this, and they did an action plan to determine how they were going to achieve and finish their test. And also This gave them an opportunity to explore the options that we have here. Our options are they could either go through a GED system or they could take a HiSET. This gave them an opportunity to look at both tests and make a decision on their own which one they would prefer to pursue. And then I wanted to also give an example of a math lesson. My links are not working today. So this one is a game board, and this can be done with almost any subject. I think this is a lot of fun, and there's different ways I've seen them used. But if you look, the game board has squares around it, and you might have them say, hey, complete 6 squares, and then they could fill them in with color or something after they do each one. This is another opportunity, though, for differentiation. So if some students might think they understand least common multiple and greatest common factor in fractions, just fine. They don't have to do it. They can move on to ratios, rates, and proportions, or ratios, fractions, decimals, and percents. They can do what they want to. So here is where first I had them go to this website. I'm not going to pull it up because it'll bring up a video, and I'm scared to put videos on here right now. But it's a website called School Yourself, which is a fantastic math website that will walk them through lessons, but it's interactive. So it makes them answer questions and demonstrate their understanding as they go. So after they do that, they then get to go to the Factors Millionaire game and go play a game practicing the knowledge that they've just acquired. This one was, this is on Math Play that I've got this one. These are all free. I do want to mention that I don't use anything that's not free because we're in adult education, so we're nonprofit, so we pretty much have to use free. From there, they went and did practice on one of our formatives. So I was able to incorporate formative into this HyperDoc. And they go and they do the additional practice here, finding the least common denominator. And then from there, they were to go to Sketchpad, where they could write the steps taken to figure out the least common multiple, and they could include it. The link right here. So Sketchpad's kind of cool too, because they can go over and they can write on it. Though this feature is actually on formative as well. But they can go here and they can write on it 1 + 1. And then afterwards, they can save it and give me the link to it. And then they grab the link and they can just paste it back onto that. And you see there's plenty of room. I mean, this could take quite a while if they went through and did all of them. But that's just another version that I think is pretty cool. And I wanted to try to show as many of the different ones as I could. So I'm going to stop here just to see if there's any comments or questions at this point. And I'm just going to come over here because I can't hear. So I'm just going to read what you guys said. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. David said, hey, Ashley, what is the name of the educator who you learned that awesome HyperDocs definition from? Was it in the community center? That was, I didn't say her name, did I? That was Lisa. I don't want to say her last name because I'll say it wrong, but you know who I'm talking about. He also said, Lisa, I think it's, I'm not sure how you say it, but yeah, that was Lisa. She shared with me one of her presentations. I really liked her definition. futureme.org is great, and it's really super easy to use. And do you have HyperDocs shared anywhere for public access? Yes, I actually shared it at the very top here. I created a website. If you scroll all the way to the top of the chat, you can find it. But I created this website that is HyperDocs for adult educators, mostly just because I'm trying to get adult educators more involved with HyperDocs. I feel like we're a little bit behind on it. But on my website, I give you an overview, and I continue to add to it. Every time I create one, I put it on here, and I've welcomed other people to add to it as well. But I've got links. I'm going to make more tutorials on this, on how to make HyperDocs and do different things with them. But on this website, I have all different subjects that I've done throughout since I started. Because what I found was all of a sudden I have so many, and I didn't even realize I had that many. But like I said, I create these all the time. So I decided just to start organizing them and sharing them so anybody is welcome to use them. Are there anything else? Okay, I think we are good. Okay, so I'm gonna continue. So I wanted to look at a couple of them. As you can see, you can use them for almost anything. In fact, I don't know of anything you can. I even had a conversation the other day with Nicole about how I was starting a new role at my job and I felt very disorganized. So I actually created a HyperDoc for my job description, and so that I had everything in one place. And I just think there's so many different opportunities. You can get very creative with HyperDocs. I did want to show you a couple of others. The topic that people often ask me about is ESL, English as a second language. So I'm involved in this technology integration training for adult educators in the state of Texas, and I had an assignment to turn a normal lesson plan into a digital lesson plan, but I decided to challenge myself and make it an ESL lesson because I don't teach it, but I'm trying to help teachers in ESL to integrate technology a little bit more. So I created this one. It may be that it's too hard. For some students, it would probably just depend on their level and their technology level. But if nothing else, you could at least use parts of it. So this one but I like to make things, so that's probably why it was fun to me. And just a side note while I'm waiting for it to pull up. So the questions come up to me many times. How long does it take you to make a HyperDoc? Really depends on what you're doing. I can make mine in less than 45 minutes, just depending on if I just follow a basic template and I know exactly what I'm looking for. It's usually not too difficult. Something like this, I made from scratch, so it took more time. But it probably took a couple hours, to be honest, because I was exploring and I was learning, and ESL is not something I know very much about. So that's something to think about too. But I turned around and made one on hurricanes not that long ago that took me probably 30 to 45 minutes before I started a class. So this was the food and shopping HyperDoc. I went ahead and I included directions, very specific directions for the students so they know what to do. From there, the students were to click on the Padlet. The original lesson had called for them to write the items of grocery list items on a board. Instead of doing that, I wanted them just to come to this Padlet. From here, they could come here and type in food items. What did I say? Pickles. I don't know why I said pickles, but that sounds good. And each person could contribute to that discussion like that. From there, the next section was what kind of stores are these? So they look around, they read the signs, and then they enter their answer here. And what do they have in common? And this section, I think what I would probably recommend doing is I'd print this out and have the students walk around. This was called a speaking shop. So you ask your teacher and classmates the questions below. They ask the teacher, where do you shop for food? Or they ask the classmate, and they go around and practice their English. And then what I personally would recommend doing, mostly because I see a lot of issues with using a computer and keyboarding, at least in my classroom, I would probably have them take their answers and then type them into the document. From here, we used a word bank. So with a partner, look at the pictures and pronounce each one. So you do see that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration as well. So they can work in pairs or groups if you want them to, or they can work independently. And then choose words from the word bank and enter the correct ones under the pictures. So they actually literally are typing in to the squares. And next section is, what do you remember without looking at the previous slides? See how many of the terms you remember, enter them in the boxes, and then enter the number you remembered in the box below. And in this, they were actually able to, I made it where they could actually type in the letters into each box in the crossword. So enter the missing letters in the puzzle below. And then we went on to the conversation shop, work with a partner, practice being a customer and a shop assistant. So in this one, they're basically practicing their dialogue with each other. And then in the second part of this conversation shop, write a new conversations in the white conversation blocks asking for different items, then practice your conversations with a partner. So now they're making their own. And then here they go to learning chocolate, and my chocolate is supposed to cannot get my things to work today. But they go to the website. Learning chocolate is a pretty neat it's an ESL website that lets them practice their writing and their speaking. So they would go to the website and they do the 5 store lessons, and then they enter their scores on the side. But you see that there's every subject. I love doing the social studies. Social studies and reading are my 2 favorite ones. I have also done professional development. So when I do actual face-to-face trainings, I've recently started to use HyperDocuments during it. That way I can provide my people in my training, I can provide them with resources to take with them, because the second you access that HyperDocument, it's automatically going to save to your Google Drive. So you have it forever, basically. I also use them for social studies, science. I do it for math. There's a lot of new digital literacy ones that have come out that are pretty neat too. All of this stuff is on that website. Wanted to see which one. I wanted to demonstrate at least one more. Oh, this is one that I got from Lisa off of her website. Just because I just wanted to show the different variations of things that are out there. This is not something I've used, but I thought it was kind of funny. So this is the art of the selfie. They give you definition of what is a selfie. This is very relatable to pretty much everybody, I think, at this point, both adults and kids. Engage. So then they watch a little video clip. And then they turn and talk. How often do you take selfies? So they talk to their partners. They explore, read the science behind why we take selfies. And then they continue. Why do we take selfies? Is taking selfies about vanity or how hard? They watch the video clip. And see, and they're using Padlet. So go to Padlet to share what are your takeaways from these 3 resources? Why do we take selfies? And contrive, they do another turn and talk. But you see, there's a lot, and the Answer Garden is another great collaborative tool that you can use. It is similar to Padlet, except it's shorter answers. So you kind of want to keep that in mind. If you use Padlet, I use if I want a longer discussion, but Answer Garden's good for short, simple questions, or if you're just looking for one-word sentences. One-word sentences, that didn't make any sense. If you're just looking for one-word answers. And so based on what you've seen, can you guys give me some ideas of what skills and knowledge the students need to use HyperDocs? And more importantly, what technology do they need to effectively use HyperDocs? If you want to share some of your thoughts on that in the chat pod, you can do that now. A lot of the problems that I've seen, especially in adult education, is we do lack technology. And I'm sure there's a lot of schools out there that do as well. So I do make suggestions. Obviously, best technology, in my opinion, is always going to be a desktop computer, a laptop, or a Chromebook. You have a lot more opportunity that way because they can do a lot more exploration. But these HyperDocs can be used from student devices as well, iPads, notebooks, or even cell phones. I would just proceed with caution if all you have are a student's cell phone, because you want to keep the links pretty minimal, because you don't know what their phone is capable of doing. If you lack technology altogether, my recommendation is to group or pair students, walk them through a HyperDoc on an overhead. If you at least have an overhead, there's no reason you guys can't do it together. You can also assign it as homework or have students go to a computer lab. At my facility, we actually have a computer lab that's free and open. Otherwise, they can go to a library or go someplace that has Wi-Fi. You can always use this for flipped instruction as well if you want them to go home and do it and then come back and discuss it the next day. But basically, you just really want to tweak your HyperDoc to meet the needs of not only your students and your instruction, but also the technology that you have available. I do another recommendation or side note is I do HyperDocs in all different ways. Sometimes we do it depending on my group. Sometimes I have a lower reading group that I will do completely different than I do with a higher reading group. So with my lower reading group, we will often do one slide at a time together, but for those few students that might be a little bit further ahead, they can go ahead and work on their own. So again, HyperDocs really allows for differentiation. The other thing that you're able to do with HyperDocs, as far as differentiation goes, is perhaps not every student is at the same reading level, so you can give them different HyperDocs to work on individually, and the other people, the students around them, don't know that they're doing a different level, but that way they can work at their own level. And I'm going to stop real quick to see if there's any comments or questions. Let's see. Yes. Amazing tree. Okay, nice work. Okay, teachers need to have a working knowledge of Google Docs. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out, Nicole. You heard me talking about that earlier. They do absolutely need to have a working knowledge of Google Docs. This has come up more than once. If you do not know how to use Google Documents, I would learn that first, because they are critical to it. And like I said, in the second one that I hope to do, it'll be more of a how-to to walk you through each thing. And it's not really that hard to learn Google Documents, but you really need to know, because then your students need to know so that they understand. What skills and knowledge? Let's see. I like to Jennifer said, I like to explain the HyperDocs to students as I was to other teachers so they understand that it isn't just a doc with links. Yeah, excellent point. That is where a lot of people do get confused, is they think it's just simply, but it's not. They're constantly interacting with the document. What tech do we need to effectively use? Jennifer also said students need knowledge of all the sites you are going to direct them to within the HyperDoc. Yes, that's a really good point. They need knowledge of the site. So once they get to the site, they need to know how to use it. And the other thing that I've been noticing when I've been looking at other people's HyperDocs is a lot of times they have to have accounts. So know what you're getting into before you do it. Make sure that, I mean, don't just go, oh, here, this is going to be easy. I can go use somebody else's HyperDoc. Because that's not how it works. Because a lot of times these things are linked to things, that, accounts that I've already set up. Now, usually, like I said earlier, I like to use anything that lets my students log in with their Gmail account, their Google account, because that's always my best bet no matter what. There's some great sites out there, especially reading sites, but again, they have to have, or formative, same with formative. If they use a formative, they have to have an account already set up. So sometimes on the HyperDoc, I'll supply them with the code and the link directly so that they can do it that way as well. So there's a lot that goes into this. A lot of times, teachers want to know what they're supposed to be doing. Well, you are acting as a facilitator, and that leads me to my next part. So this is less about a teacher-centered world, we're getting out of that anyway, and more about a student-centered environment. So reasons to use HyperDocs: fewer lectures, more face-to-face interaction. So HyperDocs allows you the opportunity to sit with those students that really need the help while the other students are working. So you get to walk around and go face-to-face interaction with your students as they're working. A lot of flexibility, and this is great for substitutes too, I might add. However, you might want to, as long as your students are know how to use them, you can use them for when you have a substitute. Multimodal opportunities. You are experiencing a lot of different websites, a lot of different apps, and differentiation, of course. You definitely get to differentiate your instruction in ways that you can't with normal lessons. Again, like I was saying, what does the teacher do? The teacher acts as the facilitator. They encourage critical thinking and discussion. Formative assessment from a computer. Once student has shared their document, teacher can view it and make comments and suggestions. I often do that while they're working. I'll just try to make sure that they're understanding with the questions being asked and that they're on the right track. If they're not on the right track, I can either walk over to the student or I can comment on the side. Also, formative, let's see, walk students through each step. That is another thing that you can do. You can walk them through the steps and have them work, and we can work on it together, or you can have them do it individually. And I usually like to end my lessons by going through the entire HyperDoc on the overhead to make sure that they had clear understanding of what they just saw. Before I go there, I did want to look at one more example. So I wanted to look at this one. So again, this is a Google document. And you'll recognize, for me, these are really probably better for adult learners. Sometimes a lot of these really, really cool ones that I love seeing, they're just too much for the adult, but they're great for K through 12. They have there's a lot of activity and a lot of stuff going on. We tried to keep things a little bit simpler, especially for the different learning styles and disabilities. So in this one, I'm just going to walk you through this last one. So this was the Race to Space Speech Collaborative Reading HyperDoc. We did a pre-reading section just to assess what knowledge the students currently had about John F. Kennedy. So they answered the questions here. You'll notice I use vocabulary.com a lot. If you're not familiar with vocabulary.com, that's another one I highly recommend. They actually let you copy up to 100 pages of text, and then you put it into their tool, and they will pull out the vocabulary words for you. That website has single-handedly helped so many of my students pass their GED test because my second language learners really struggle with words in social studies and science. And so by becoming more familiarized with them, it really, really has helped them. From there, they engage by watching this video clip. And then they list 2 or 3 items that they learned from the video. The other thing I wanted to point out, you can add to it or you can take it off. So I usually like to add a pre-reading or pre-lesson assignment of some sort before I start. Or you can just jump into the engage section. From there, we explored. We went to the people history and read about life in 1961. And then they were to answer questions about what they just read. And then we went to the JFK's Race to Space speech I believe that was on Common Lit also. And then as they went through, the nice thing about the Common Lit website is they have the sections numbered so that you can go in and identify. And so what they did, and I was trying a new reading strategy that I had just learned about called collaborative reading, where if they understood it, they would just mark click, and if they didn't understand it, they'd mark clunk. Then this turned into a group activity where they break into 3 to 4 people and then read the article again, because it was a speech that's a little bit tougher on them, but that's more of the level they need to be at in order to pass their tests. They would go through then and then discuss the sections that they had difficulties with. And then we went to the apply section where they were to identify the speaker's audience, main purpose, and basically they were doing some analysis here. From there, they shared again. You notice that I'm a Padlet lover apparently because I use it on almost every HyperDoc I do. But then they went to Padlet and answered some discussion questions, which we then turned around and shared on the overhead. And then we went into the reflect section where please share 1 to 3 things that you learned from this lesson today. And then finally, here's our extend lesson where they could continue learning more about JFK and the space program. I wanted to read the comments. Okay, yeah, Jennifer likes Google Slides. Yeah, the Google Slides is fun, especially if you're kind of artsy. David said, I bet it helps if the technology that you are embedding also allows you to link back to the HyperDoc and other sites. Absolutely. Jennifer said, also for me in a public school, our tech has some sites, videos, but yeah, that's a good point too. I tend to forget that. Sometimes videos are blocked. So yeah, you really have to know your technology before you use it. That's for sure, for what you can and cannot use. And Brain Pop is another one I forgot about. And there's a ton of them. And some people, there's a bunch I have not tried yet that I'm dying to try. I just can't seem to find the time. But a lot of people are using, I can't even think of the name of it now. But there's a bunch. I know that a lot of people are using the ones with the videos. What is that, Flipgrid? I still haven't used Flipgrid. I'm dying to, but I just haven't taken the time to learn it. But you can incorporate, what is that term that everybody's using, Mashup? You can incorporate almost anything out there. You can incorporate it into this. So, which makes it, even more fun. And what I find that I like so much about it is it's that deeper learning experience. Usually turns into something project-based, but the students learn, and my test scores have actually proven that this is a much better way for them to learn. And for my students, they prefer to do it this way now. They cannot stand it when they get a substitute because they want to do this type of thing versus something else. So they really prefer it and they really respond well to it. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude this section. So now educators should now know what a HyperDoc is and how it is implemented, how to use HyperDocs in administration, professional development, and the classroom. Reasons to use HyperDocs. Well, in the classroom, I still have adult ed classroom, sorry about that. And skills, knowledge, and technology required to use HyperDocs. Were there any final comments or questions? Let's see. I'm going to have to check Brain Pop out, Jennifer. Jennifer says, I have Padlet in everyone I have made as well. Okay, Jennifer, you and I understand each other. Yeah, Padlet is just super easy. I have made so many of them. It's not even funny, but Padlet's a lot of fun. It's definitely one of my great. David said he learned a lot. Yay. Okay, well, it's a good overview. It does take some time to learn if you're not familiar with it, but I really recommend it. And thank you for joining me for this session. And I am going to, there will be a part 2. That's a good point. There will be a part 2, and I'll make that announcement as soon as Nicole and I discuss that because I was thinking about that earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and end the session. Thank you again for joining me.